Hello and welcome to our discussion on the simulation strategy. Entrepreneurship the Game is a simulation game that is intended to provide you with some hands-on experience in developing a product, marketing a product, and managing cash flow. There are 4 quarters to the product simulation, and your due diligence will be performed during the second, third, and fourth quarter. During the first quarter, what is going to be most important is your product development. The procedure you follow during each quarter is the same. However, the due diligence that is performed in quarters 2, 3, and 4 is far more extensive than your initial due diligence. During each quarter, you will look at product design, if configured to be allowed to do so, the market selections, which markets you wish to sell in, the ad plans to create an ad campaign, the promotional budgets associated with those ad campaigns, the price of the product, and the projections of units to be sold. Once you're done with that step, you will then look at cash flow to ensure you have a positive cash flow. And lastly, your HR investments. Once we get to quarters 2, 3, and 4, we'll have a far more extensive analysis to take place to see if revisions should be made. Begin by taking a look at the main screen. The main screen is broken out into a top and bottom portion. On the top portion of the main screen are your keys that allow you to go to the various pages: product, marketing, and cash flow. You also see the quarterly due dates and the current quarter you happen to be in. You will also see underneath the due dates a message indicating if your product development is constrained to quarter 1. Your faculty can configure the system to allow the product to be modified during all of the quarters, or it can be restricted to no modifications after quarter 1. So make sure you look at this portion of your main screen to decide, what is the configuration associated with your particular version of the simulation. As you can see, the buttons in the upper left-hand corner will take you through the various pages associated with the product decision, the marketing decisions, and the cash flow decisions. The bottom portion of your screen contains information that becomes very important during the second, third, and fourth quarters. And we'll discuss that in a few moments once we get into the second, third, and fourth quarter data analysis. So the key is your main screen is composed of 2 elements, the top and the bottom. The bottom screen has a table showing your results over the quarters that have been processed, and the bottom portion of that, a table showing the results for the entire class for this particular quarter. As we'll see, the top table is a growth table, and the bottom table is going to be a gap analysis. By looking at the product design, first and foremost, the table that you see here represents a vertical. Your industry may be standardized, so the features may be different literals, if you will. But it is very straightforward. Each feature of a product has a value to one of the 5 markets, as you can see in the table. The value proposition of a feature ranges from a low value of 0, meaning no value to that particular market, to a 7, meaning very high value. Since you're allowed to enter 5 products, the 5 features to define your product, the maximum value proposition in a market can be 35. That really is your targeted goal. That's what you're interested in achieving. You want to have your product have a value of 35 in a particular market. Now understand, we're going to have 3 markets. Having 3 markets implies that you will not really be able to have a value proposition of 35 in all 3 markets. You may not be able to even have a value proposition of 35 in any market. But once you've elected your initial set of features, what you then need to do is select the 3 markets in which you wish to pursue the sale of that product. The best approach is to attempt to optimize one particular market. Once you've completed optimizing that market, then look at the additional markets that have that product possibly at the highest value and select those markets. Once you're done with your preliminary processing of product creation, update the information and then take a look at the bottom portion of your screen. The portion of your screen now shows you a summary of your decisions. It shows you the 5 product features you've selected. It shows you the cost associated with each feature, and it shows you the suggested list price. It then indicates the markets that you have selected and the value proposition. As you can see, circled in the elements here represents the value in that market. For example, in market 3, the value of the product you created has 31 out of a possible 35, which means that's very, very good. Now, there may be other markets for the features you've selected that are higher, but if you notice, markets 2 and 4 have lower value propositions than market 3. Now, your goals and objectives are to try to optimize, if possible, all 3. So what you would do is, after reviewing this summary table, is go back up to the table preceding and possibly change the features or change the markets. Then come back down. This is an iterative process that you would go through to try to, if you will, develop the product you're going to be selling. Now, this is extremely important in those simulations where it has been configured to not allow changes to the products in quarters 2, 3, and 4. If that is your simulation, then you must ensure that the product you have designed in quarter 1 is the product you wish to sell for the entire 4 quarters of the simulation itself. Once you have elected and determined these are the best markets for the features I've selected, then your next step is to proceed to look at the marketing information. But before we do that, let's just take a look at the due diligence we'll perform in quarters 2, 3, and 4. Briefly, earlier, on the bottom of your main screen, we now have these 2 tables. The top table, as I indicated, represents growth information. The bottom table represents gap analysis. So as the simulation proceeds through the various quarters, you're going to look at the top table, and the most important parameters here are cash in bank, quantity on hand, gross margin, revenue in each of your markets, units sold, and market share. And your objectives are to see a growth pattern in each quarter. Now, you do so by possibly advertising more heavily. You do so by changing some of the markets. You may do so by changing the quantity on order, your projections. However, you would use this top table of data, of information, to essentially grow your business. That is your objective. That is what you are tasked to do. And you can look at the growth by seeing how much cash in bank I have. You know, is my quantity on hand high or low? We want the lowest quantity on hand, but we also don't want stockouts. Is my gross margin improving? And again, that has to do with the particular product lines. Now, one of the constraints will be if your simulation is constrained to allow changes to the product only in the first quarter, and that means that some of these elements can only be impacted by changing markets. And that really is what your decision would have to be. And this is where the second table comes into play, the gap analysis. And gap analysis allows you to look at the entire class, your competitors in a sense, and to look at your quantity hand versus theirs, look at your revenues in the various markets comparatively to theirs, market share, cash analysis, and so on, and see if there are gaps. If you find, for example, that there are very few products in market 4, you may wish to change your product to be in market 4, even though it may not have the highest value proposition in that particular market, due to the fact that there's minimal competition, implies you should sell more. So the key behind it is in quarters 2, 3, and 4, Due diligence is performed by analyzing the information at the bottom of your main screen. Adjustments that can be made are twofold. If allowed, you can change product features. That is, you can create essentially a new product with possibly as we discussed, a value proposition that is much more geared towards market 3 or 4 than, let's say, markets 1 and 2. You can also change the markets that you wish to pursue. Based on your analysis of the gaps that exist in your particular industry, your attempt is to try to improve, enhance your growth, your revenues, your units sold. How do you do this? If allowed, by changing the product features and by changing the markets. Once you have done that, you now have and will proceed in the decision making associated with marketing and with the cash flow. So the idea is that due diligence is performed at the beginning of quarters 2, 3, and 4, and your goals are to enhance the growth of your company and to determine if there are any gaps that will allow you to grow your company even faster. In cases, once we have the product and the market, the next step is to look at the ad plans, if you will, the ad campaigns. And in this case, what we have is we have a series of ad plans, if you will, and these ad plans have an effectiveness in the various 5 markets. As with the value proposition, the effectiveness range here is 0 to 7. 0 means an ad plan has no effect whatsoever, no matter how much you spend in that particular market. 7 means it is extremely effective, which means you will get more contact, if you will, more awareness in that market if it is a 7 for every dollar you spend. So your goals and objectives are to look at the various ad campaigns for the markets you have selected. Now remember, every quarter allows you to change markets, and you can change markets based on the gap analysis. You can change markets based on the competition. So the idea, though, is you don't want to have a market where your ad plan has all zeros, because it doesn't matter how much money you spend, you will have no awareness, no improvement in the awareness. Customers will not know your product exists. So the idea behind it is for you to select up to 3 of the ad plans for the markets that you have previously selected and look at the effectiveness. Now, given that we have 3 ad plans, the maximum effectiveness is 21. As with the value proposition, it is improbable that you would have an effectiveness of 21 in all 3, using all ad campaigns in all 3 markets. So the key behind it is you need to look at the market that is the most effective for you, namely the value proposition of your product. Look at the market that has the greatest population and the market that has the greatest effectiveness, so you get the most for your promotional dollars. And as you can see, the bottom part of the screen shows you this summary information. And as you can see, for the 3 markets that have been selected, it shows us the effectiveness of the ad campaign that we have created. Again, the ad campaign in one market may be better than another. Now, if for example, we are not interested or we don't like a particular market, then go back to the previous screen and change the market to reflect an ad campaign that may be more productive. Once we're satisfied with the ad campaigns, which essentially are made up of the ad plans, we then proceed to enter budgets for each of these. And remember, the more effective an ad campaign is, the more effective our budgetary dollars are going to be. So a high effectiveness means that our dollars are going to be well spent. A low effectiveness means our dollars are not going to be well spent. Once we've entered the budget for the 3 markets that we are pursuing, we have 2 other decisions we have to make. The first decision is, what is the selling price going to be? You're shown on the screen the suggested selling price, but you can elect to sell it at a lower or higher price. Again, depending upon the gap analysis. If you find, for example, that you're moving into a market that has very few competitors in it, this is looking at the gap analysis on your master main screen, you may be able to sell the product at a higher price than suggested because there's very little competition. On the other hand, if you're moving into a market that is highly competitive, you may have to lower your price to sell it before. And this is where you now need to think of, the competition, what they're doing. In addition to that, you have a second decision, and this is the number of units to order. You have to have inventory to sell to the customer. Now, the total inventory represents the quantity on hand and the on order quantity that you are making a decision for. Quantity on hand is inventory that remains from the previous quarter that was not sold. So in making a projection of how many units you're going to sell, what you need to do is you need to take a look at the quantity on hand and look at the market sizes to ascertain what is the market for this particular product, how many units, how many customers potentially are there, and then adjust accordingly in creating a projection. The projection should be the sum of your quantity on hand and your quantity on order. Now, as we'll discuss in a few moments when we get to the cash flow screen, we have to be very careful about excess inventory. Zero inventory stock out, that is, we sell all of our inventory, is not necessarily a good thing, simply because we do not know how many more units we could have sold. However, on the other side, excess inventory costs us money to store. Also, excess inventory essentially is money coming, cash coming from the balance sheet and being moved down to inventory, which is really the direction we do not want to go. So the projection, which is, by the way, one of the most difficult elements in the real world, is to determine how many units potentially you're going to sell. Once you have done that, you're now done with the marketing screen, and we now will proceed to cash flow to make sure we have a positive cash flow. Made our product decisions, our market decisions, our marketing decisions and budgets, we now come into the cash flow. Now on the cash flow, our goals and objectives are very simple. This is a pro forma. That is, it is telling us what it could be, not necessarily what it will be. And the big reason for that is, if you notice the starred item in the cash flow, projected revenue, that is all that is. It is a projection. It is a hope that we're going to sell this number of units. There is no guarantee we're going to sell the number of units we have projected. So one of the problems in a pro forma cash flow is that we may not sell those number of units, thus our projected revenue income flow can be considerably less, which may make us negative. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have a conservative cash flow. That is, we compensate for the possibility that our revenue is not going to be what it is. Now understand the complexity of what we're referring to. We're buying X number of units. We will pay cash for those units. So we're taking money out of our bank account, we're paying our vendor for those units, and we're putting those units in inventory. If we think of it from a balance sheet, it is moving from cash in bank to inventory. So we'll see that on our cash flow. That is a given. So when we see the number of units we're purchasing, we're going to spend that amount of cash to purchase that inventory. Will we sell that inventory? That's the real question. And so we need to make sure that we compensate for any uncertainty that we have in that value. And this is where we can borrow from our personal bank accounts. We can take out loans from commercial, family. We can sell shares of stock, and so on. In addition to that, on this screen, we also have the ability to expense or hire people, HR. Hiring people allows us to become more productive, more effective. That is, our gross margin should theoretically improve. Our revenue should improve, but the converse of that is we will have higher salaries. So on this screen, we're attempting to ensure that our pro forma cash flow will become a positive cash flow after the quarter has been processed, and that we also invest in HR. These represent the decisions that we will be making on a quarterly basis. And as with the inventory, as with the projections, as with the budget amounts, as with the markets, these are decisions we're going to make each and every quarter. But the goals of the simulation are to provide you with some experience in the topics that you're discussing in class, to give you an opportunity to exercise your managerial choices in deciding what product features are best for your product, how well that aligns to the value proposition for a particular market, the selection of those markets, the associated ad campaigns for each and every one of the markets you've selected, the promotional budgets that you will expend to promote your products in the particular markets you have selected, the selling price for your product, the projections of that product, and eventually the external sources of cash that are going to help you manage your cash flow. In addition, we have additional training videos on the website that you should review as you are progressing through the various decisions. Merely clicking the training button in each and every one of the pages, product, market, and cash flow, will bring up a video that will show you information pertinent to that particular topic, that particular functional area. Again, thank you for looking and listening and reviewing this information, and we wish you the best of luck in the simulation. Thank you very much.